Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something really wild. We're unpacking a radically contrarian argument that completely challenges the absolute bedrock of what you, and well, frankly, most of the world thought you knew about mathematics. We're looking at a highly provocative text titled Infinity Unworthy, and its goal? To totally dismantle a concept we've all just taken for granted since grade school. Yep, I'm talking about infinity. This isn't just some tiny tweak to a formula. We're looking at a proposed paradigm shift that demands we throw out the infinite entirely. As we go through this, definitely keep an open mind, because the author's arguing that our reliance on infinity isn't just a simple error. It's a completely outdated illusion. Let's get right into it. The author hooks us right out of the gate with this incredibly explosive claim. And what's really striking here, there's absolutely zero middle ground. They frame our modern reliance on infinity in one of two ways. One, it's mathematically lazy, basically the mark of an amateur. Or two, it's intentionally deceptive, meaning someone is actively playing you. There's no room here for the idea that infinity is just a complex, valid tool. Nope. According to the source material, if you're invoking the infinite today, you're either lacking competence or you're lacking honesty. It's a massive, really massive, shot across the bow of the entire global mathematical establishment. It sets a super combative and urgent tone for everything we're about to explore. So, to really understand why the author is so fired up about this, we need to trace their historical view. They don't see infinity as some eternal, fundamental truth of the universe. Instead, they frame it as an outdated ghost, specifically hailing from the 1800s. The 19th century is really where this concept took root. Then the text argues it essentially leaked into the 20th century. It basically overstayed its welcome and seeped into modern math, where it simply didn't belong. And now, well, here we sit in the 21st century, and the author insists that this leakage absolutely has to stop. We're in an era where we expect rigorous logic, and it's time to force the issue. We either get real, solid answers about infinity, or we get silence. Building directly on that 21st century mindset, the author argues that today, our standard for intellectual and scientific rigor has to be absolute. In this century, we expect answers. If the answer is silence, something is wrong. Think about that. When we ask fundamental questions about the very tools we use to measure the universe, we can't just accept a shrug, right? And the text points out that the mathematical community's response to the deepest questions about infinity is exactly that, a deafening silence. Now, for the author, this silence isn't a sign of some beautiful, profound mystery that we just haven't solved yet. It is the ultimate red flag. It literally means that something at the very core of the discipline is deeply, fundamentally flawed. And this brings us right to the core thesis of the whole argument. The author points to a stark lack of definition, stating categorically, no proper definition has been given yet, and none can be given. Notice the phrasing there. The author isn't just saying, hey, we haven't quite figured it out yet. They are stating it is a strict impossibility. None can be given. Instead of providing a working, rigorous definition of infinity, mathematicians are, according to the text, hiding behind an untenable past. They're clutching onto this 19th century placeholder because admitting that infinity cannot be defined would essentially collapse the whole house of cards. It's a seriously powerful accusation. The claim is that the entire field is operating on a term that inherently defies proper definition. So how does the author back this up? Well, they completely dismantle what they call the lazy definition. You know the one, the classic n+1 rule, where we just assume we can keep adding 1 to a finite number forever. We've all been taught that. But instead, the author proposes what they consider a state-of-the-art reality. They argue that at a certain point, numbers literally stop being numbers beyond a vague region of incredibly large quantities. It completely shatters that previous logic. You can't just keep adding 1 infinitely, because the very concept of a number breaks down when things get too massive. The fundamental mechanics of counting just stop working the way we assume they do. Now, dismantling that lazy definition leads us directly into a really profound existential void. Because if you can't just add 1 infinitely, this forces us to ask the most basic mathematical question imaginable. What is a number? Seriously, what is it? If numbers have a boundary, if they stop behaving like numbers in this vague region the author talks about, then our entire foundational understanding of what a number actually is has to be totally called into question. By pulling this single thread of infinity, the author has basically unraveled the very fabric of basic arithmetic, demanding that we rethink the core units of measurement themselves. And the author's answer to that huge, fundamental question is brutally honest. We have no proper answer to what is a number. We simply don't know. According to this perspective, anyone who thinks they do know the answer and that includes professional mathematicians, is simply providing wrong ones. The text boldly claims that these mathematicians are entirely unaware of the true state of modern mathematics. Basically, the argument is that they're so blinded by the legacy of infinity, they don't even realize they lack a working definition for the absolute most basic unit of their own discipline. It's really a sweeping indictment of the mathematical status quo. But the author isn't just here to tear things down. They are actually proposing a radical fix. The solution? Completely deleting the concept of infinity from our vocabulary. Just gone. And they claim doing this has only positive consequences. Now, at first, you might think the whole system would totally collapse without it, but the author insists there are absolutely zero negative drawbacks to getting rid of infinities. Zero. In fact, all the complex mathematics that currently seems to depend entirely on the word infinity, the text argues it can all be easily upheld without it. We aren't losing math. We are just excising a flawed concept. Okay, but how exactly does math survive without infinity? The author insists that, practically speaking, reasoning from the concept of infinity and reasoning from numbers that simply become too large to function, well, they yield the exact same mathematical output. Think about that for a second. Whether we rely on the illusion of the infinite or just accept the reality that numbers eventually get too massive and hit this vague region where they break down, the practical calculations remain completely unchanged. The mechanics of mathematics function perfectly well without needing to invoke this magic, indefinable word just to make the equations balance. This brings the historical and mathematical arguments together into one really neat conclusion. The word infinity was invented when we did not grasp that numbers stop being numbers beyond a vague region. Infinity, therefore, is nothing more than a historical band-aid. It was merely a placeholder invented by people a long time ago before we possessed the modern understanding of the true, finite limits of immense quantities. Because they couldn't comprehend that numbers eventually break down, they kind of panicked and just invented infinity to fill that cognitive gap. So in this view, it's just a linguistic artifact of past ignorance. It's not some eternal mathematical truth. Which brings us to the author's strict ultimatum. Should we keep trying to define infinity or finally give up on the word? As we've learned from the source material today, giving a proper definition is, according to the author, literally impossible. So the choice is pretty clear. Is it time to abandon the infinite forever? To modernize our understanding of numbers and their real limits? Or are we just keeping the word around to entertain ourselves, essentially living in a 19th century fantasy rather than facing the rigorous reality of the 21st century? It's a massive provocation that challenges the very math that built our modern world. So what do you think? Are you ready to let infinity go?